I once believed life was simple. I had a steady job at a marketing firm in Willow Creek, a small Pennsylvania town where everyone knew each other and life moved slowly. My wife, Linda, and our two kids, Ella and Max, filled our home with laughter. Weekends were spent hiking in the woods or hosting barbecues. One Saturday in late October, as the leaves turned vibrant, we decided to visit the old Grayson Manor, an abandoned estate rumored to be haunted. The kids were excited. Linda was indifferent but joined us, while I dismissed the ghost stories I'd heard over the years. "It's just an old building," I told the kids as we approached the dilapidated structure. Its tall windows loomed like dark eyes. "Nothing to fear." "Come on, Dad, let's explore," Ella urged, her enthusiasm infectious. Inside, the air thickened with the scent of mildew and something electric. The floor creaked beneath our feet, echoing through empty halls. Each corner seemed to whisper secrets, yet I dismissed it all. Linda took photos while the kids ran ahead, laughing. I wandered into the drawing room, where faded portraits hung askew, their subjects staring blankly. "What a dump," I muttered. Suddenly, I felt a chill, like a breath on my neck. I turned, half expecting a prank from the kids, but the room was empty. Unease crept in, but I brushed it off. "Get a grip," I told myself. Later that evening, around the fire pit, I shared my experience. "I swear I felt something in there," I said, looking at Linda. "Just your imagination," she replied, her gaze on the flames. "Maybe," I conceded, but doubts lingered. The following week, strange things began at home. It started with the clocks. No matter how much I adjusted them, they all stopped at 3:33 a.m. I dismissed it as faulty batteries, but then came the whispers. Soft murmurs floated through the house, especially when I was alone. "Did you hear that?" I asked Linda one night, my arms prickling. "Hear what?" she replied, flipping through a magazine. "Never mind," I muttered, feeling foolish. The kids were oblivious, but one evening, while helping Ella with her homework, I noticed her staring at the corner of the living room. "Daddy, who's that?" she asked, wide-eyed. "Who's who?" I replied, glancing over my shoulder. "There's a lady in the corner," she whispered. My heart raced. "Ella, there's no one there." A week later, Max burst into the kitchen, pale. "The toy cars are moving by themselves," he exclaimed. I shot a skeptical glance at Linda, who shrugged. "Kids have wild imaginations," she said, but I saw a flicker of concern in her eyes. I tried to dismiss everything as stress. Work had been overwhelming, and maybe I was overreacting. But the next night, while getting ready for bed, I heard a soft voice calling my name. "Mike." It was barely audible, like a distant echo. I froze. "Linda," I called, but she was asleep. I tiptoed through dark hallways, peering into each room, but found nothing. The next day, I mentioned it to my neighbor, Mr. Thompson, an old man who often shared tales of the town's history. His eyes widened. "You know, they say Grayson Manor was built on old burial grounds. Some claim the spirits never left." I laughed nervously, dismissing his words. "It's just an old house with stories." That evening, I decided to confront whatever was happening. "If you're here, show yourself," I called into the darkness, half expecting nothing. But then the lights flickered, and a cold breeze swept through the room. My heart caught in my throat. "Dad!" Ella's small voice broke the tension. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I managed, but doubt gnawed at my mind. In the following days, bizarre occurrences piled up. Doors creaking open, shadows flitting past windows, and the feeling of being watched. I turned to online forums, desperate for answers, but the stories mirrored my experiences, blurring reality and imagination. One night, we were gathered in the living room watching a movie when the lights went out. In the silence, the air thickened. "This is just a power outage," I assured everyone, but even I wasn't convinced. As I moved toward the window, a soft laughter echoed from the hallway. My heart raced. Linda looked at me wide-eyed. "Did you hear that?" "Yeah," I whispered, trembling. "What was that?" Ella and Max exchanged fearful glances. "Maybe it's the lady," Ella said softly. After an eternity, the power returned, flickering back to life, but the laughter lingered in my mind. That night, as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling wondering if we had awakened something at the manor. Maybe it was all in my head, or maybe not. The line between reality and imagination blurred, leaving me with more questions than answers. As the clock struck 3, I heard it again. A soft whisper, clearer this time, calling my name. "Mike!" I sat up, heart pounding, unsure whether to be terrified or intrigued. The truth felt elusive, like smoke slipping through my fingers. What I once thought were mere figments of imagination now haunted my thoughts, leaving the mystery of Willow Creek unresolved. We lived a simple life on Maple Lane. My wife Claire, our 2 kids, Jenna and Max, and I had settled into our charming 3-bedroom home among the towering oaks. The neighborhood was quiet, where everyone waved hello but didn't pry into your business. One Saturday morning, in late October, we decided to visit a nearby pumpkin patch. The air was crisp, filled with the sweet scent of fallen leaves. The kids laughed and played, their voices echoing in the golden afternoon. As we picked pumpkins, I felt warmth radiate from the sun, blissfully unaware of the unease that would soon settle over our home. That evening, as we returned, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a shadow over our house that suddenly felt more foreboding than welcoming. I shrugged it off as fatigue. After dinner, Claire and I settled on the couch while the kids watched cartoons. Just as I was drifting into a doze, a loud crash erupted from upstairs. "What was that?" Claire's voice was tight with concern. "I'll check," I replied, though hesitation crept in. As I climbed the stairs, the air grew colder. The hallway was dimly lit, shadows flickering in the corners. I reached the kids' room, and there it was, a toy soldier sprawled on the floor, its plastic rifle still clutched in its tiny hand. I shook my head, convinced it had simply fallen off the shelf. The kids were sound asleep, peaceful and innocent. As I turned to leave, I heard a soft whisper, barely audible. "Daddy." It was faint but unmistakable. I gripped the doorframe, heart racing, but when I spun around, the room was empty. "Just your imagination," I muttered, heading back downstairs. The next few days blurred together in a haze of normalcy, punctuated by strange occurrences. That night, Claire woke me, her eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" "What?" I asked, groggy. "Voices from the kitchen." I listened. The house was silent, save for the creaking of old wood. "It's probably just the house settling," I reassured her. But as the week progressed, the whispers grew clearer, coupled with cold drafts that cut through the warmth of our home. Jenna insisted she saw a figure standing in the corner of her room, a shadowy outline watching her. "Daddy, it was just standing there looking at me," she cried, clutching her blanket. "Sweetheart, it was probably just your imagination," I said, though uneased gnawed at me. One evening, as I sat on the porch with a lukewarm beer, our neighbor, Mr. Thompson, approached. "You notice anything odd in your house lately?" "Odd? Like what?" I asked, skeptical. "I've heard stories about your place," he said, lowering his voice. "Some say it's haunted. A family lived there before you, lost a child." "Haunted? That's nonsense," I scoffed. But my mind wandered. That night, after a long day at work, I stumbled into bed, too tired to think straight. Just as I was about to drift off, a sharp knock echoed from the hallway. I shot up, heart pounding, and crept toward the noise. When I reached the hallway, the kids' room door was ajar. I pushed it open, and the air turned icy. Jenna sat up, eyes wide, terror etched on her face. "Daddy, he's back," she whimpered, pointing to the corner. "Who's back?" I asked, trembling. "The man, he wants to play," she whispered. At that moment, I glanced at Claire, who stood frozen by the door, pale as a ghost. "We need to get out of here," she murmured, fear lacing her words. I felt a wave of irrational anger. This is ridiculous. It's just a child's imagination. But deep down, doubt took root. The following days were filled with restless nights, whispers, and shadows that seemed to dart just out of view. Cups would be found in odd places, mirrors would fog without reason, and I even found the front door cracked open one morning despite having locked it the night before. One afternoon, pacing the kitchen, I grabbed a coffee cup, and as I turned, it slipped from my hand, shattering on the floor. In that moment, I could have sworn I heard laughter, soft and childlike. "Did you hear that?" I asked Claire, who was reading in the living room. "What?" she replied, looking up. "Nothing," I said, shaking my head. But the laughter lingered, a ghostly echo that refused to fade. As Halloween approached, unease settled in like a heavy fog. We decided to have the house blessed, a desperate attempt to restore peace. But even the priest hesitated at the front door. "Sometimes houses hold memories," he said cryptically. "Be careful what you invite in." After a brief service, we felt momentary relief, but the shadows returned with unsettling intensity. On Halloween night, as the kids dressed as ghosts and goblins, I watched them with dread. What if the stories were true? Just as we settled in, a sudden chill swept through the house, snuffing out the flickering candlelight. The laughter returned, clearer now. I grabbed Jenna and Max, sweeping them into my arms. "Daddy, don't let him take us," Jenna screamed, terror evident in her eyes. "It's okay, it's just the wind," I said, but my voice wavered. I tightened my grip as Claire clung to my side, her eyes wide with fear. The door slammed shut, and the laughter grew louder, echoing through the walls. I looked at Claire, her expression mirroring my confusion and terror. "Maybe it's just in our heads," I whispered. But as the laughter crescendoed, I wasn't sure anymore. As the night dragged on, we huddled together, shadows flickering around us. Our house felt like a fragile bubble, one that could burst at any moment, leaving us questioning what was real and what was merely a figment of our imagination. In the end, the whispers continued, unresolved, tugging at the edges of our minds as we tried to escape the past that lingered in the corners of Maple Lane. Life on Maplewood Drive was a beautiful monotony. Mornings were filled with the familiar sounds of clinking silverware and the purr of the coffee maker as I prepared breakfast for my wife, Sarah, and our two kids, Emma and Jake. We had just returned from a week-long family trip to the coast, and the scent of salt lingered on our clothes like an unwelcome guest. That first night back, while Sarah settled the kids into bed, I flopped onto the couch, exhausted. The house was quiet, save for the occasional creak of the old wooden floors. I noticed the lamp in the corner flickering. I dismissed it as a faulty bulb and turned my attention to the TV. But moments later, the flickering intensified. The light danced erratically, casting shadows that stretched across the walls. I shrugged it off again. Just a light issue, I told myself. But the feeling of being watched lingered. The next day, I was in the kitchen, attempting to make lunch. As I reached for the bread, a glass fell from the counter and shattered into 1,000 glinting pieces. I jumped back, heart racing. "Emma? Jake? Did one of you bump the counter?" "No, Dad," Jake yelled from the living room, confusion in his voice. That evening, I shared my experiences with Sarah over dinner. "You know, I think this house might be a bit odd," I said, chuckling nervously. "You and your imagination," she replied, brow furrowed as she served pasta. "It's just an old house. Things break." But the next morning, I awoke to whispers. They were soft, like rustling leaves in a gentle breeze. I sat up, straining to hear. "Sarah?" I called out, but she was still asleep. The whispers grew louder, forming indistinct words that slipped in and out of comprehension. By the time the kids were off to school, I was already on edge. I confided in my neighbor, Mrs. Hawthorne, who had lived on Maplewood Drive for decades. "Strange things happen in old houses," she said calmly. "You just have to be respectful of what might linger." "Respectful?" I scoffed, trying to mask the tremor in my voice. "You mean like it's haunted?" She smiled, her eyes twinkling with knowledge I wish I didn't sense. "Maybe it's just a visitor with unfinished business." That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a chill sweep through the room. I could see furniture outlines in the dark, but the shadows pulsed, breathing with the rhythm of my heartbeat. Suddenly, a soft voice called out my name. "Dave." I shot up in bed. "Sarah?" I turned to see her asleep beside me. I reached for the bedside lamp, and as its glow filled the room, I could have sworn I saw a figure at the foot of the bed, a translucent silhouette with hollow eyes. My breath caught, and when I blinked, it was gone. The next day I told Sarah, but she shook her head. "You're just stressed from the trip. It's nothing." That weekend, the kids' laughter grew eerily quiet as they played upstairs. I ascended the stairs to find them in Emma's room, staring at a wall. "What's wrong?" I asked, but they remained transfixed. "Do you see her?" Emma whispered, pointing to a dark corner. "She's sad." A cold shudder ran down my spine. "Sue," I pressed, but the kids wouldn't respond. Instead, they exchanged glances, as if communicating without words. "Let's go outside," I urged, ushering them away. But the moment we stepped out, a gust of wind slammed the door behind us. That night, I ventured to the attic, seeking answers. Dust motes danced in the light of my flashlight as I rifled through old boxes. Among forgotten trinkets, I found an antique mirror, its frame ornate and weathered. As I wiped away the dust, I glimpsed something in the reflection. A fleeting shadow, a face with hollow eyes. I stumbled back, breathing heavily. Was this all in my mind? The whispers, the figures, the children's fear? Or was the house a vessel for something beyond comprehension? I shared my findings with Sarah, but she sighed. "You're letting your imagination take over." Days turned to weeks, and occurrences escalated. Objects moved, chilling drafts swept through rooms, and the whispers grew more persistent, calling my name. I could no longer deny that something was happening. Finally, I gathered the family for a heart-to-heart. "I think our house has some history," I started. But Emma interrupted, her eyes wide. "We have to help her, Dad. She's lonely." The room fell silent. Sarah glanced at me, skepticism etched on her face. "Help who?" Before Emma could answer, Jake piped up. "The lady in the mirror." I felt the room spin slightly as the implications sank in. "What lady?" I managed to ask. "She's just looking for someone," Emma said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and empathy. As I stared into my children's wide eyes, I feared that they might be right. Maybe there was a flicker of truth hidden beneath reality. Was there a spirit reaching out, or was this all a product of our imaginations, my mind unraveling under the weight of the unknown? That night, as I lay in bed listening to the quiet hum of the house, a soft voice called out again. "Dave!" I turned towards Sarah, still asleep, and whispered, "Did you hear that?" She stirred, but didn't answer. The shadows danced at the edges of my vision, and the whispers grew louder, wrapping around me like a cold embrace. I closed my eyes, unsure whether to surrender to the darkness or fight against the unseen force pulling me closer. The air thickened with tension, and I realized that the line between reality and imagination had blurred. Was it all in my head, or was something truly lingering within the walls of our home?
The answer remained elusive, echoing unanswered in the stillness of the night.
When I first moved to Maplewood, a quaint town in Pennsylvania, it felt like stepping into a postcard. The air was crisp and the leaves danced in the autumn breeze. My wife Sarah and I bought a charming Victorian home that had seen better days but had character. The creaky floors and peeling wallpaper told stories of the past. It was perfect for our little family. Our days were filled with routines, work, school runs, and cozy dinners. But as the days grew shorter and nights colder, things began to change. It started subtly. One evening, while watching TV, I noticed a flicker out of the corner of my eye. I glanced toward the hallway, but nothing was there. "Did you see that?" I asked Sarah, who shrugged, engrossed in her book. I tried to dismiss it as fatigue, but unease crept in. The next night, as the wind howled outside, I heard a soft whisper, a child's voice calling my name. "Danny?" I leaned forward, straining to hear, but the house was silent again. I looked at Sarah, half asleep on the couch. "Did you hear that?" I asked, feeling foolish. "Hear what?" she mumbled. "Never mind," I replied, but my heart raced. Over the following weeks, the whispers grew more persistent. One night, while Sarah put the kids to bed, I decided to check the attic. It was dark and musty, illuminated only by my flashlight. As I scanned the space, I heard a soft giggle. I froze, feeling the hair on my neck stand up. Just the wind, I told myself, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I mentioned it to my neighbor, Mrs. Hargrove, who had lived in Maplewood her entire life. "Oh dear," she said, her eyes widening. "This house has a bit of a reputation. The previous owners reported strange occurrences too. You're not the first." Skepticism flared inside me. I wanted to dismiss her words, but as I returned home that night, I found the front door slightly ajar. My heart raced as I pushed it open, the rusty hinges creaking ominously. Inside, the air felt heavy, charged with tension. I turned to lock the door, and that's when I saw it, a shadow darting at the edge of my vision. "Is someone there?" I called out, my voice shaky. Silence answered. The weeks turned into a blur of unsettling events. Toys moved from their places, cold drafts chilled me in rooms with no open windows, and shadows danced just out of reach. Even the kids began to notice. "Daddy, there's a lady in my room," my daughter Lily said one night, her blue eyes wide with fear. "Just your imagination, sweetheart," I reassured her, though doubt began to gnaw at me. I confided in Sarah, but she remained unconvinced. "It's an old house, Danny. It creaks and groans. You're reading too much into it." One rainy evening, I sat alone in the living room, staring at flickering candle flames. A sudden crash jolted me from my thoughts. I rushed to the kitchen, where a glass had shattered on the floor, tiny shards glimmering like stars. Just then, a soft sob echoed through the hallway. "Lily?" I called, my heart pounding. I dashed toward her room, but she was fast asleep, her body curled under the covers. The sobbing continued, and I felt an overwhelming urge to comfort whoever was crying. "Who's there?" I whispered, half expecting a response. The sobbing ceased, and an icy breeze swept past me. I began to doubt my own sanity. Was it all in my head? One night, I confronted Sarah. "We need to talk about what's happening here," I insisted, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked at me concerned. "What do you mean? You've been acting strange. Maybe you need to see someone." I felt a surge of frustration. "I'm not crazy. There's something in this house." Days later, I decided to investigate further. I researched the home's history and uncovered a tragic tale. A young girl had lived there long ago, lost to a sudden illness. The stories echoed in my mind, each whisper now taking on haunting significance. That night, I set up a recorder on the kitchen table, hoping to capture something. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a presence beside me, cold and lingering. The next morning, I awoke to static on the recorder, but also a soft voice. "Help me." I rushed to show Sarah the recording, but when I played it back, all that remained was silence. "See, it's just an old machine," she said, but I could see doubt in her eyes. Weeks passed and the occurrences escalated. Doors slammed shut, whispers morphed into cries, and shadows became more defined. I felt as though the house was alive, breathing around me. One stormy night, I stood at the top of the stairs, contemplating whether to delve deeper into the spirit world or retreat to my logical life. As thunder crashed outside, I heard a voice, clearer than ever, saying, "Danny, please." The air grew thick with tension, and I stood frozen, caught between belief and disbelief. Was I losing my mind, or was something truly reaching out to me from the shadows? I called out, "What do you want?" but only silence answered, leaving me in a haunted limbo of uncertainty. As the storm raged on, I retreated to my room, feeling the weight of unseen eyes upon me. Was it the house, or was it something deeper within me? I couldn't tell anymore. And as I lay in bed that night, the whispers danced through the walls, leaving me to ponder the thin veil between reality and imagination.
wondering if the haunting was real or if it had all been in my mind.